One freezing night in 2021, after a long day of remote work, I stepped outside to take out the trash, and that's when I noticed the footprints. They were too close to my house. Too fresh. And they definitely weren't mine. It all started a little while after I'd moved out to the countryside. The pandemic had pushed my job fully remote, and I figured it was the perfect excuse to ditch the city. I found a quiet place way off the main road, just 3 houses spread far apart, tucked between long stretches of woods and snow-covered silence. It was peaceful. Isolated. And I liked it that way. The closest neighbor I had was a guy named Larry. About my age. At first, I thought we might hit it off, maybe grab a beer sometime, but that never really happened. We exchanged a few hellos when we crossed paths, but that was it. We kept to ourselves. Then came the storm. A relentless snowstorm rolled through that winter and didn't let up for days. It started light, but by the time it was over, my driveway was buried in nearly 2 feet of snow. I wasn't going anywhere for a while. Honestly, I didn't mind. Working from home meant I didn't need to leave the house, and I wasn't in a rush to dig myself out. No plows were coming down my road anyway. I figured I'd wait until the sun did some of the work for me. So I stayed in, day after day, working late in my home office, completely undisturbed. Or at least I thought I was. One night, after wrapping up work, I remembered the trash bins. If the pickup crew somehow made it through in the morning, I wanted to be ready. I bundled up, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside into the freezing air. As I crunched down the driveway, dragging the bins behind me, something caught my eye near the side of the house. Footprints. They stood out, clear and unmistakable, fresh impressions in the snow. And they weren't mine. I hadn't been outside in days. I followed the tracks, my breath visible in the cold air. They led straight to one of my windows, my office window. The one I'd been sitting in front of for hours. Someone had been standing there, watching me. A chill rolled through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I scanned the empty road, the tree line, Larry's house in the distance. Nothing. No movement. No sign of anyone. Could it have been Larry? I had no reason to think it was. Besides, why would he sneak around like that? I circled the house, checking for more tracks. The prints led away from the window and disappeared down toward the road, vanishing where the snow had been disturbed. I went back inside, locking the door behind me. Then I double-checked all the windows and doors, even though I knew they were already locked. Still, something didn't sit right. I kept thinking about it as I got ready for bed. Before I turned in, I peeked out the office window one more time. The prints were still there, but snow had started falling again, light and steady. I figured by morning they'd be gone. I lay awake longer than I should have, staring at the ceiling. The thought of someone standing outside in the snow, just watching, not at me. I couldn't shake it. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I did was check the window. The previous night's snowfall had mostly covered the old tracks. But in their place, fresh again, was a new set. Same spot. Same window. Someone had come back. While I was asleep. There were no other tracks around. No vehicle Daniels. No other footprints leading from a car or driveway. Just that one set, heading back toward the road before disappearing. That's when I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't expect much, figured I was low priority with everything going on, but I wanted to report it. Just in case. They took my info and said someone might swing by when they had a chance. I didn't hold my breath. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus on work. My eyes kept flicking to the window, half expecting to see someone standing there again. That night, I stayed up late. I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, watching the window like it was a TV screen. I waited for hours. Nothing. Eventually, I gave in and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. The following day passed without incident. No new prints. No strange sounds. Just snow and silence. Maybe they realized I'd noticed. Maybe they decided to stop. I told myself that over and over. By the end of the week, I was going stir-crazy. The roads were finally cleared enough to get out, so I grabbed my keys and made a run to the store, just to break the monotony. Afterward, I stopped by a nearby park for a short walk. The air felt good, and for the first time in days, I felt like myself again. But as the sun dipped behind the trees and I headed home, a question crept into the back of my mind. What if they come back while I'm gone? I was just getting back from a quick grocery run when my headlights swept across the side of my house, and that's when I saw him. A man. Standing right outside my office window. The light caught him for only a second before he turned and bolted into the darkness. But that 1 second was enough. It was Larry. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My pulse was racing, not from fear exactly, but from disbelief and anger. I didn't bother calling the cops. At least, not right away. I've always believed some things are better handled face to face. So I walked straight over to Larry's place and knocked on his door. When he opened it, he gave me this fake look of surprise, like he wasn't expecting anyone. I didn't waste time. "I saw you," I told him flatly. "Outside my house." "What the hell were you doing?" At first, he denied everything. Played dumb. But after a minute or two of back and forth, me getting angrier, him fumbling for excuses, he finally admitted it. He never gave a good reason. Just mumbled something about checking on me, or thinking he saw something, or some other garbage that didn't make sense. I didn't care what his excuse was. I told him, point blank, to stay the hell away from my property. He nodded and shut the door. That was it. But from that night on, I kept everything locked, every door, every window, and I never looked at Larry the same way again. When I was 16, a man nearly stabbed me in my own living room, and it all started with a kid I barely knew. Back then, it was just me and my mom, living in this cramped little apartment in a rough part of town. She was a nurse and worked crazy hours, often coming home well after midnight. So I spent a lot of evenings alone. I didn't have many friends. We'd only moved there a year earlier, and I hadn't clicked with anyone at school. Most nights, it was just me, homework, and whatever was on TV. That's when I met Ryan. He lived a floor above us. We weren't close, but we hung out sometimes, played games, watched TV, just killed time. He was way more outgoing than me. Always talking about his friends, always chasing a little trouble. He wasn't a bad guy, but I never fully trusted him. Still, on those long, lonely nights, having someone to talk to helped. One night, my mom was working late again, and Ryan came by around 7. We hung out for a while, just chilling on the couch, but by 9, we were both bored. That's when he pulled out his phone and said, "Let me call Tyler." I asked who that was. "Friend of mine," he said casually. "You'll like him." I figured it was some other high school kid from his world, someone I hadn't met yet. I didn't think much of it, until Tyler showed up half an hour later. Ryan buzzed him in, and when the door opened, I immediately knew something was off. Tyler wasn't a teenager. He looked like he was pushing 30, beard, dark circles under his eyes, worn-out clothes, and this heavy jacket that reeked of cigarettes. He walked in like he owned the place, like he'd been here before. I gave Ryan a look, but he didn't react. Just grinned and acted like everything was fine. Tyler sat down across from me and started talking like we were old friends. His tone was laid back, even friendly, but there was something intense behind his eyes. He asked weird questions, stuff like, "You ever steal anything?" Or, "You ever do something you couldn't tell your mom about?" I gave awkward laughs and shook my head. "Nah, man. Not really." Then he pulled out a small plastic bag. Whatever was in it, I didn't need to ask. I knew it was drugs. He looked at both of us and grinned. "You guys wanna smoke?" I froze. Ryan shrugged like it was nothing, but I shook my head. "Not here," I said. "My mom would kill me if she found out." Ryan frowned a little, but Tyler? He didn't like that. "Come on," he said, leaning forward. "Just a little. No one's gonna know." I held firm. "No, man. Seriously. Not in my place. That's when his face changed. His smile vanished, and his eyes narrowed. What, you think you're better than me? He asked, voice low and sharp. I shifted back on the couch. I didn't say that. Before I could finish, Tyler stood up fast, looming over me. He reeked of smoke and booze, and then I saw his hand go into his jacket. When it came out, he was holding a knife. It wasn't huge, but it didn't need to be. I felt my chest tighten and my hands start to sweat. He held the knife low, almost casually, just enough to make sure I saw it. Ryan noticed too. I could see the tension in his face, but he didn't say a word. My heart was pounding. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay calm. My phone was sitting on the table a few feet away, and for a split second, I considered lunging for it, calling the cops, getting help. But something held me back. If I did that, Ryan would go down with him. And even though I was furious, he was still the only friend I had. But I wasn't going to let some sketchy dude flash a knife at me in my own damn apartment. I took a slow breath and raised my hands a little. Look, man. I don't want any problems. But you gotta leave. Tyler stared at me, then smirked like he didn't believe I had the guts to stand up to him. That's so? My mom's a nurse, I said quickly. She knows cops. If you don't go now, she'll find out. You don't want that. It was a bluff. Total crap. But for whatever reason, it landed. Tyler glanced at Ryan, then back at me. A long pause. Then he let out this cold little laugh like the whole thing had just been a game. Whatever, man. You're no fun anyway. He turned to Ryan. Let's bounce. Ryan hesitated, but followed him out. I didn't move until I heard the door click shut. Then I locked it. Deadbolt, chain, everything. I just stood there for a while, listening to the silence. Trying to breathe. Eventually, I sat back down, but I couldn't relax. Couldn't stop shaking. That was the last time I ever spoke to Ryan. I ignored his texts, stopped answering the door, and when I saw him in the hall, I acted like I didn't know him. After that night, I spent the rest of high school alone. And you know what? I didn't miss anyone. When I was 10 years old, I almost followed a stranger into his house, and to this day, I wonder what would have happened if I had. It was the mid-90s, and back then, we played outside. No phones. No screens. Just bikes, tree forts, and neighborhood-wide games of hide-and-seek. Our street was full of kids, and the woods at the end gave us endless space to explore. That afternoon, 6 of us had gathered to play. We used the big green electrical box a few houses down as home base, and my sister Chloe was it first. As she counted, we scattered like always. I took off toward the next block, aiming to go farther than usual. There was this one house I always passed but never paid much attention to, unkempt yard, no cars, kind of rundown. I figured no one would look for me there. I crouched next to a utility pole at the edge of the yard. Weeds had grown around the base, and if I stayed low and still, I was basically invisible. I waited, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and running feet. The sun was still high enough for light, but shadows were starting to stretch across the sidewalk. It felt good, being hidden, outsmarting everyone. Then I heard it. A door opening. I turned my head just slightly and saw an older man stepping out onto the porch of the house I'd ducked near. He looked right at me. I froze. He wasn't yelling. Wasn't angry. He just stared, then started walking toward me. When he got close, he tilted his head and asked, "What are you doing there?" I stood up slowly. "We're playing hide-and-seek, sir." I expected him to tell me to scram. Instead, he smiled and said, "If you want a better hiding spot, there's a perfect place in the backyard. No one will find you there." At first, it sounded great. The yard was fenced in, totally hidden from the street. I figured he was just some nice old guy, maybe bored and happy to help out a kid. So I followed him. We walked around the side of the house, and that's when I saw the backyard for the first time. The grass was high in places, patchy in others. A rusted shed leaned against the back fence, and a few dusty lawn chairs were stacked in one corner. It wasn't creepy exactly, but something about it felt wrong. Off. I went and crouched behind the shed, half hoping Chloe would come by so I could jump out and win. The man stood near the back door, just watching. After a minute he went inside. I stayed where I was, knees pressed to the cold ground, waiting. Listening. Then the door creaked open again. He stepped back outside and walked slowly toward me. "You know," he said with a crooked smile, "if you come inside you can see the street from the window. You'll spot all your friends running around. That'd be fun, huh?" I hesitated. "That's okay. I like hiding out here." His smile faded. "Just a little. Come on. Just for a minute. You can see everything." I shook my head and said softly, "I'm fine out here." That's when his voice changed. It got sharp. Frustrated. "It's better inside," he said. "You should come in." I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, suddenly wishing I'd never followed him into that yard. "I'm just gonna stay out here," I said, trying to sound casual, like nothing was wrong. Like I wasn't panicking inside. He stared at me in silence. Then, slowly, he took a step forward. "Come inside," he snapped. "Just for a second." His voice had gone loud, almost a yell. The second his foot moved closer, I bolted. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran, tearing across the backyard, cutting through the driveway, and sprinting down the street like my life depended on it. By the time I made it back to the others, my chest was heaving and my legs felt like rubber. My sister Chloe spotted me first. "Where were you?" she asked, frowning. "We couldn't find you." Still catching my breath, I pointed back toward the house. "I was hiding over there. That guy, he told me I could hide in his yard. Then he tried to get me to come inside." Everything got quiet. No one laughed. No one asked if I was kidding. We didn't even talk about it. We just silently agreed to stop playing and walked over to Brian's backyard instead. But my brain wouldn't let it go. That night I told my parents everything. I thought they'd yell at me for being dumb or careless, but they didn't. They listened. My dad's expression got tight, and then he stood up and went straight to the phone. He called the cops. Officers came by later and asked me a bunch of questions. I told them everything, the game, the man, what he said. What happened after that, I don't really know. But the news spread fast. Within a week, every kid in the neighborhood knew, "Don't go near that house." And we didn't. For the rest of my childhood, that yard might as well have been surrounded by razor wire. No one went near it. Not even close. And even now, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stepped inside. My name's Andrea, and in the fall of 2019, I moved into a little off-campus apartment for my final year of college. It was my first time living alone. At first, it felt strange. I'd always had roommates, people to talk to, vent to, feel safe with. Now it was just me, a one-bedroom unit in a slightly rundown building. But the price was right. It was close enough to walk to class, and I figured I could use the independence. The place wasn't bad. Old, sure, but clean enough. My neighbors were quiet, and I mostly kept to myself anyway. About a month in, someone moved into the apartment next door. I saw him only briefly, dark hair, average build, probably around my age. As he passed me in the hall, I introduced myself. He barely looked at me. Mumbled something like, "Mason," and slipped into his apartment without another word. Awkward, sure, but I didn't take it personally. Not everyone's chatty. I let it go. A few months later, that's when the noise started. At first, I thought he was putting up shelves or fixing furniture, occasional thuds and bangs from his unit. No big deal. But then it started happening at night. 1:30 in the morning, thud. 2:15, bang bang bang. Always coming from the same place, the wall behind my bathroom. It wasn't like music or footsteps or even arguing. It was random, angry-sounding pounding. And it started happening more and more. Still, I didn't want to be that neighbor, the complainer. So I let it go for a while. But the more it went on, the harder it was to ignore. One night, around 3 a.m., a massive crash jolted me out of sleep, followed by a weird dragging noise, like furniture scraping the floor or something heavy being moved. I sat in bed, heart thudding, staring at the ceiling. The next afternoon, I decided enough was enough. I walked over and knocked on his door. At first, nothing. But I could hear movement inside. He was there. I knocked again. Finally, the door cracked open. Just a sliver. Mason stood in the gap, barely visible. His face was flush, beads of sweat across his forehead, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Hey," I said, trying to sound friendly but firm. "I live next door. I just wanted to ask if you could keep the noise down at night. It's been waking me up." He blinked like he didn't understand, then raised his eyebrows, trying to look surprised. "Yeah, sorry. I'll keep it down." His voice was flat. His hands were twitching, and he was sweating a lot for someone standing still in a cold hallway. I stood there for a second, unsure whether to say more. But I let it go. He shut the door, and I walked back to my apartment, still uneasy. I didn't know what was going on in that unit. But I had a bad feeling it wasn't just furniture. "All right, thanks," I said, and Mason shut the door with barely a word. Over the next few nights, things got better. The loud banging stopped. In its place, I'd occasionally hear soft tapping or this strange grinding sound coming from the same spot behind the bathroom wall. It wasn't loud, just enough to notice when I was lying in bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I considered going back over to talk to him again, but since the noise wasn't waking me up anymore, I figured it wasn't worth it. Then, after a few more days, even that stopped. The silence felt like a gift. I assumed whatever bizarre project he'd been working on was finally finished. I let my guard down. A few weeks later, I was crouching in my bathroom, reaching into the cabinet under the sink to grab a cleaning spray, and that's when I noticed it. A small vent near the floor had always been there, but this time something caught my eye behind it. A dark spot. I leaned in. Looked closer. It was a hole. Tiny, just big enough for a finger to poke through, but carved clean through the drywall. I thought maybe it was leftover damage from plumbing work, but when I ducked lower, my stomach turned. The hole was positioned perfectly, right at eye level, when sitting on the toilet. I grabbed my phone and shined the flashlight through it, and my blood ran cold. I could see straight into the wall. No insulation. No obstruction. Just an open view directly into the adjacent unit, Mason's apartment. Suddenly, everything made sense. The noises. The wall. The way he always seemed sweaty and anxious. The late-night banging. He hadn't been fixing anything. He was watching me. I backed away, sick to my stomach, trying to breathe. I snapped a photo of the hole and sent it to my best friend. Her reply was instant. "Call the cops." Now. When they arrived, they checked the hole and confirmed it had been drilled deliberately. They knocked on Mason's door. This time, he opened fast, but he looked pale, wide-eyed. Panicked. I stood in my doorway, arms crossed, watching the officers speak to him. He nodded, shrugged, said something I couldn't hear. Then one of the cops stepped inside. A few minutes later, they walked him out in handcuffs. One officer came back and told me what they'd found. Mason had installed a tiny hidden camera, pointed straight through the wall into my bathroom. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had spoken to this man once. I barely knew him. And for months, he had been secretly watching me through the wall. I never saw him again. His apartment stayed empty for a while after that. When someone new eventually moved in, I didn't tell them what had happened. I just wanted to forget it and move on. But every now and then, when I'm brushing my teeth or taking a shower, I still check the walls. Just to be sure. It was the fall of 2005 when we moved to New York. Me, my wife Julia, and our 7-year-old son Noah. We were excited. A new city. A fresh start. Our house was small but cozy, nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It felt like the perfect place to raise a kid. That first day was a blur of unpacking. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, we were wiped out, all of us lounging in the living room, finally enjoying a moment of peace. That's when someone knocked on the door. It was 9 p.m. Noah looked up from his blanket fort, puzzled. Julia gave me a look. We weren't expecting anyone. "Who is it?" I called out. A soft voice answered. "Your neighbor." I opened the door to find a petite woman with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She looked to be in her mid-30s and was holding a foil-covered dish in both hands. "Hi," she smiled warmly. "I'm Emma. I live next door with my husband and daughter. Just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." The smell of baked lasagna hit me like a hug. "Wow, that's really kind of you." "Thank you." Julia came over, and we all chatted for a moment. Emma was easy to talk to, bright, polite, comforting in a way. But the conversation ended abruptly when a man stormed up our driveway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, scowling. "Emma," he barked. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was sharp, almost violent. Noah jumped. Emma's smile faltered instantly. She handed the dish to Julia like it was burning her fingers. "Sorry," she whispered. "I should go." The man, her husband clearly, grabbed her arm and pulled her away without so much as a nod. He muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't make it out. Julia shut the door slowly. "Wow," she said. "He seems intense." The next few weeks were peaceful. Emma would stop by sometimes with cookies or just to chat. She always apologized for Daniel, said he had a short fuse but a good heart. I wasn't convinced. She was sweet. He was not. Daniel rarely spoke. If we saw him outside, he'd just glare. Cold eyes. Silent. Then one night, around 1 a.m., Julia and I were jolted awake. "Why do you always do this?" a voice roared. It was Daniel. We could hear him yelling from inside their house, followed by a loud crash, like something heavy hitting a wall. Julia sat up immediately. "We should check on her." I hesitated. But I got out of bed and followed her. We knocked on their front door. No answer. After what felt like forever, the door finally creaked open. Daniel stood in the doorway, shirtless and drenched in sweat. His face was flushed, veins bulging along his neck. Rage poured off him in waves. "What do you want?" he snapped, his eyes narrowing. I tried to stay calm. "We heard yelling," I said. "Just wanted to make sure everything's all right." His face darkened even more, and he stepped closer, towering over me. "Mind your own business," he growled. "And don't ever come here again." Before I could respond, he slammed the door in our faces. Julia grabbed my arm, visibly shaken. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "Emma might need help." The next day, I couldn't stop watching their house. Around noon, I saw Daniel lugging things into his car. Emma was nowhere to be seen. Only their daughter, a quiet little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood nearby, her head down. But what really stuck out was the black briefcase. It was huge, and Daniel struggled to lift it into the trunk. It looked heavy, far too heavy. Then, as he locked the front door, he spotted me watching from our balcony. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, a wide, empty grin that sent ice down my spine. And then he drove off. My gut twisted. Something was very wrong. I went down to their driveway, searching for anything, any sign of Emma. That's when I saw it. A thin trail of red. It streaked from the garage down to where the car had been parked. Faint but real. My hands started shaking as I pulled out my phone and called the police. When they arrived, they broke the door down while I stood behind them, heart thudding in my throat. The inside of the house was chaos. Furniture overturned, broken glass everywhere. It looked like a fight had taken place, violent and fast. Upstairs, one of the officers called out. I followed. Under the bed in the master bedroom, they found a baseball bat. Blood caked the handle, and strands of dark hair clung to it. My knees nearly buckled. "He did something to her," I whispered. The investigation went public. For weeks, there was no sign of Emma or Daniel. Then, one afternoon, I got the call. "We've arrested him," the officer said. "Daniel was caught at the airport, trying to leave the country." Relief washed over us, but Emma was still missing. That's when the police decided to talk to the little girl. They asked her if she knew where the briefcase was. Her voice trembled when she answered, "Daddy buried it in the forest." With her help, they searched the nearby woods. It didn't take long. Half buried beneath layers of leaves and dirt, they found it, the black briefcase. The smell hit before they even opened it. Inside was Emma's body, her face frozen mid-scream. A twisted, silent echo of the horror she must have felt in her final moments. Daniel confessed in custody. Claimed Emma had cheated on him. Said she deserved it. But Julia and I knew better. Emma had been kind, gentle, full of light. Daniel was the monster. His arrest made headlines. People were horrified, neighbors shocked. The cul-de-sac became a place of whispers and locked doors. Julia and I couldn't bear to stay. We sold the house within a few months. But before we left, we made one final choice. We took Emma's daughter in. She had no one else. No family. And she didn't deserve to be swallowed up by foster care, not after everything she'd already survived. We raised her like our own. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd see her sitting quietly in her room, just staring out the window. And I knew she still remembered everything. Some scars don't fade out. I was 14 when it happened. Even now, decades later, just thinking about that night makes my hands go cold. It was October. A quiet, chilly evening around 7 p.m. I'd just gotten home from school, and my mom and sister had gone out grocery shopping. I was alone. Dad wasn't due back until 8. He and our next-door neighbor, Mr. Bennett, carpooled to work to save gas. I settled onto the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and put on a horror movie I probably had no business watching alone. The shadows on screen danced across the walls, and the loud, tense music made the whole house feel darker than it should have. The volume was up high, probably too high. And that's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. A sharp rapping at the front door. I jumped, heart suddenly pounding. I hit pause on the movie and lowered the volume. "Who is it?" I called out, voice shaky. "It's Mr. Bennett, your neighbor," came the answer. His voice was calm. Familiar. Just like always. But then he said something strange. "There's been an accident. Your mother called me to come pick you up," the voice said calmly from behind the door. "Your father's in the hospital. She's too upset to drive." His words were smooth, practiced, even comforting. "I'll take you there," he added. "Go ahead, open the door." I stood up slowly, hands trembling. It sounded exactly like Mr. Bennett, same tone, same way of speaking. He even knew about my dad's job, and their carpool routine. A part of me almost believed him. But something felt off. My stomach twisted at the thought of my father being hurt, but deeper down, something kept tugging at me. A quiet alarm bell ringing inside my head. "Hold on a second," I said, trying to sound normal. I reached for the landline and dialed my dad's number. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. My chest tightened as I stared at the front door. Then came another knock, harder this time. "Let's go! Your dad needs you! Open the door, quick!" The voice was urgent. But the urgency didn't feel right. It felt forced. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran to my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My fingers fumbled across the keypad as I called Mr. Bennett directly. He picked up after a couple rings, his tone casual. "Hey there," he said. "Everything all right? Where are you right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm at work. With your dad." "Why?" That's when my stomach completely dropped. "You're with him?" I whispered. "Yeah," He's right here. Is something wrong? Can I talk to him? I asked, my voice rising. There was a pause, and then I heard my father's voice. What's going on, sweetheart? There's someone outside, pretending to be you, I said, almost breathless. He said you were in the hospital. He wanted me to let him in. The line went silent for a beat. Then Dad's voice sharpened. Listen to me. Lock your door. Stay quiet. I'm calling the police right now. Don't hang up. I dropped to the floor and huddled against my bedroom door, still clutching the phone. My heartbeat was so loud I could barely hear anything else. Then, I heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming up the stairs. Each creak of the old wood made me flinch. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Then came the knock. Open up. It's me. The voice was softer now, too soft. Trying to sound familiar. Trying too hard. But I knew better. I said nothing. The knock stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. I whispered into the phone. He's right outside my door. My father's voice was steady. Don't make a sound. The police are almost there. Minutes passed. Felt like hours. Then movement. I heard someone heading back downstairs. The creak of the front door. And then, another voice. Sweetheart, it's okay. It's us. Open the door. It was my mother. I hesitated. Frozen in place. There's a police officer with me, she added gently. It's safe now. I unlocked the door and opened it slowly. Mom stood there, eyes wide with worry. Behind her, a uniformed officer gave me a firm nod. He's gone, the officer said. We searched the whole area, but he vanished. We'll keep patrols going through the night. Relief hit me in waves, but it didn't wash the fear away. Who was that man? How did he know so much about us? And what would have happened if I had opened that door? I gave my statement to the police. My parents told me they were proud of how I'd handled it. My dad now keeps his phone on him at all times. They never caught the guy. But I'll never forget the sound of his voice on the other side of that door. My name's Lucas, and I grew up in a quiet suburb in Texas. One of those places where people still leave their doors unlocked and kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved, neighbors looked out for each other, and the worst thing that ever happened was someone's dog getting loose. That all changed 5 years ago. It started in late summer, the kind of evening where the sky fades into burnt orange before the dark sets in. I remember the cicadas were loud that night, and the air still held that sticky heat you could never quite escape. That was the night someone new moved in at the end of the block. We didn't know his name at first, but we'd come to know a lot about him soon enough. It was the kind of evening where the air clings to your skin and the sky glows burnt orange, and I remember standing at the living room window, watching a battered old U-Haul rattle its way down our street and into the driveway of the house across from ours, a house that had sat empty for months. The place always stuck out. Its beige siding was weathered and stained, the lawn looked more like a patch of forgotten prairie than grass. My parents, ever the optimists, were excited. They'd been hoping for friendly new neighbors, maybe even a family with a kid my age. What we got was him. He stepped out of the truck alone. A tall man, maybe mid-40s, with sallow skin and deep-set, haunted eyes. He wore a cracked leather jacket even though it was nearly 90 degrees, and his movements were strange, stiff and deliberate, like someone trying too hard not to be noticed. From the start, something about him felt off. He didn't wave. Didn't glance at us. Just unpacked his things in total silence. There was no music, no chatter, no friends or family to help, just the steady thud of boxes hitting the porch. Neighbors talked, of course. In a town like ours, word travels fast. His name was Mr. Harris, and rumor had it he moved from some rough neighborhood in New York. No one really knew the details. He didn't share much, and he never showed up to neighborhood barbecues or block parties. He mostly kept to himself. But he never stopped watching. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. His porch faced ours, and maybe he just liked to sit out and people watch. But over time, I realized it wasn't that. It was me he was watching. Every time I stepped outside, whether it was to get the mail, shoot hoops in the driveway, or take the trash out, his eyes would lock onto me. Not blinking. Not moving. Just staring. Sometimes, I'd look up and see his silhouette standing perfectly still behind his front window, half hidden behind sheer curtains. Always watching. Always silent. When I told my mom, she brushed it off. "He's probably just lonely," she said. "You should go say hi." I didn't want to, but I did. One Saturday afternoon, I walked across the street and knocked on his door. The yard felt like it hadn't seen a mower in years. Dead patches of grass, dried leaves, and the curtains in every window drawn tight like the house was holding its breath. When he opened the door, the smell hit me first, musty, like rotting wood and something faintly metallic underneath it. He smiled, but it was unnatural. A tight, thin-lipped curve that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low and flat. "I just wanted to say hi," I muttered. "I'm Lucas. I live across the street." He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "Good to meet you, Lucas. I'm Mr. Harris." We stood there in silence for a moment. I asked a few questions, tried to spark some small talk. He gave short answers, nothing personal. "It's fine. Quiet. Better than the city." Eventually, I told him I had to get going. Just as I turned to leave, he said something that froze me in place. "Nice house you've got there," he said. "Real nice." His voice was different when he said it, just enough to make my skin crawl. After that, things got worse. I started seeing him in strange places. Standing in his yard at midnight. Wandering slowly down the sidewalk, passing our house without ever looking away. One evening, I spotted him standing at the far end of the block, right under the street lamp, just watching. I blinked, and he was gone. Then came the photographs. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was out in the driveway shooting hoops when I felt it, that prickling sense of being watched. I glanced up. There he was, standing across the street, holding a camera, pointed directly at our house. I froze, the basketball bouncing away. "What the hell?" I whispered. I bolted inside and told my parents. My dad didn't waste time. He stormed out to confront him, but Mr. Harris had already vanished. We heard his front door close. That was it. That night, my parents sat in the kitchen arguing over what to do. Mom still insisted he was just quirky, maybe depressed. But my dad was done playing nice. "The guy gives me the creeps," he muttered. "Something's not right." We started keeping a closer watch. Kept doors locked. Curtains drawn. 2 nights later, I woke up around midnight. Click. 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 I sat up, heart already racing. I crept to my window and peered through the blinds, and there he was. Standing on the sidewalk. Camera in hand. Flash popping softly in the dark, over and over again as he took picture after picture of our house. I ran to my parents' room in a panic. By the time Dad got outside, he was gone again. But this time, we didn't just watch. My dad called the cops. When the officers arrived, we told them everything. The staring. The photos. The weird behavior. They nodded, took notes, and said they'd go speak with him. We stood by the window and watched as they crossed the street and knocked on his door. The porch light never came on. But the door creaked open anyway.